Welcome. And let's talk about streamlining your hiring for high volume roles. We did this for software engineers, front end, back end, full stack, but it's obviously applicable to other roles as well, like maybe call center, inside sales, et cetera. And we did it without all of the nifty technology available these days. So I'll be weaving in where I would add technology if I were building this again today. So yes, it can be done. So here's our agenda. I'm going to go through the problem statement. I'm going to talk about discovery and buy-in. Then we'll talk about simplifying and our old process versus our new process. And then, of course, some results. And then I have a few kind of resourcey slides to share with you so that you'll have a little more information if you want to actually take this back to your teams and start putting some of it in action. So the problem. So due to a transition to the technology platform approach at the company that I was at, the recruiting team was tasked with a massive hiring initiative for us anyway, which was to bring in more than double our annual technology hires in only 6 months. But we couldn't increase recruiter headcount. We couldn't put undue strain on our engineering and development teams. So challenge accepted. So we started in discovery. Like what was the current process? What was working, not working? If we were going to be successful and hit this outrageous goal of hiring 100 software engineers in 6 months, we were going to need to revamp our entire workflow, like soup to nuts. So additionally, we were struggling with candidate experience already. Our existing process was kind of long and cumbersome. And for talent that's in high demand, that's like the kiss of death, right? We had candidates in the interview process who were bailing out and going off to other companies like left and right. And who could blame them, because we were putting them through full interview cycles with multiple teams. So for instance, if you applied to a job that was full stack engineering for the payments processing team, and they wanted to hire somebody else, and maybe you were the silver medalist, they'd be like, okay, well, I think that person would be great for the cart team. And you would actually have to go interview with the cart team all over again. And what if the cart team, you weren't their number one choice, and then they passed you off to another team, and it was just a horrible candidate experience. We would lose candidates, obviously. Next, we were going to have to cut through the competition for SWEs. We were going to have to differentiate ourselves. And we thought that this approach to hiring could be a way to do that. And then finally, there was a lot of friction with the process internally too, like the least of which were the hiring manager review time and interview feedback time. It was just so long, like almost a business week for people to get the feedback they needed in order to move forward. And okay, so now that we know it was wrong and we know what our goal is, we need some cheerleaders, right? So we went to the top leaders of the different business units. We rallied them around this new business need, which of course wasn't hard. They were keenly aware of what was expected of them. And we found an executive sponsor. And so that person was going to help us hold the teams accountable along the way, right? From there, we identified our sponsors. And a sponsor was a manager or an IC who had been at the company more than a year and could really share the value of working at the company and the impact of the work that people would be doing during the interview process. And so they could, depending on what you needed, they could be your closer, like the fourth person in the interview panel. And then they would, just help kind of bring that candidate home and make it more likely that they would accept our offer. And the story we told everyone to get them on board was one of like reduced interview fatigue, faster hiring while maintaining our acceptance rate, our offer acceptance rate, and an overall better candidate experience. So now it's time to simplify. Hang in there. There's lots of pieces to this slide, but I'll take us through it. So first step, stop posting so many freaking jobs. It's confusing for the candidate. It takes a lot of time for recruiters to manage and pipeline from. And for us, we could reduce to front end, back end, full stack, junior, which of course we didn't call it that externally, but junior, mid-level, senior level. It's 9 recs that would represent all 100 of these positions, right? So now we've gone from a pipeline for each team / location / role / level to a pipeline for each role and level, and managed by the entire tech recruiting team, not just by each individual team's recruiter. So everybody had access to the same pool of candidates, depending on what they were, hiring for. Next, we took a look at what we were seeing in the actual job description. Were we sharing the impact they could make, what they were going to get out of working there, or was it just like a list of requirements, all the bullet points, right? What's the value proposition? And we uncovered that by interviewing the hiring teams and asking just 4 simple questions, which I will share with you later. Next, we trained interviewers to interview on skills and values fit, full stop, right? There were 4 interviews, each from a different team, interviewers, each from a different team, and they all knew what they were going to interview about, right? So when you got to the end of all 4 people, they had really covered everything that needed to be covered in that interview to assess this person. And if everyone was a yes at the end of the interview, and the person got an offer to work at the company, okay, period. Not for the payments team, not for the cart team, right? Not for, the homepage team, for the company. And then they got the offer. And as part of the offer, they got 2 to 3 team descriptions as well. And they were asked to choose which one they preferred to join. And if they weren't sure, okay, well, which one's sort of speaking to you the most, right? Let's get that hiring manager on the phone with you. And in the meantime, most people had accepted the offer. And so the background check is already happening. The IT equipment and all of that is underway, and onboarding is in full swing, right? So kind of inadvertently, we sped up the onboarding process too, which was really great. Okay, so that's how we simplified it. But what does that compare to, how does that compare to what we were doing before and what we're doing now? So when you think about resume review and phone screen, number 1 on the screen, that didn't change. A recruiter's still going to review all the applicants and do that initial touch. Step 2, we had a hiring manager review. And that's what I was saying earlier, was taking 3 to 5 days for them to get back to the recruiter. We were sending them 20 something people to review at a time. And it's just a big load for the hiring manager. And, it was bad. And so instead, when we were building out the interview training and talking about the requirements and what we were going to interview for each level, for each role, so let's say mid-level, full stack engineer, we had the capabilities and everybody agreed on them. And so we just made sure that we had a bank of interview questions that, kind of assessed those capabilities. So since we had these capabilities completely laid out for everybody, we didn't need a hiring manager review. The recruiters can use that to assess the person and decide whether or not they need to go on to the tech screen. So nothing changed with the tech screen. The engineer conducts that. They pull from a bank of questions that we stored in GitHub. That was already in existence before we started this process. And they had a large enough bank of questions to hit on the right capabilities that they could kind of pick and choose. So we weren't asking the exact same question of every person who came through the process, number 1. Number 2, that tech screen could be done by any engineer who is trained to do it, right? We didn't just have to use the people on the one team that person might be joining. And so it really opened up possibilities so we could get them scheduled faster, and everybody knew what they were supposed to be doing. So that was exciting. Step 4, the interview. We did change this. So candidates were interviewing with up to 5 people for a specific team that they had applied to, like I said earlier, like the payments team, okay? And we changed that to now they're interviewing with a diverse cross-team panel of just no more than 4 employees. And one of those people is that sponsor or that closer, that seasoned professional. And then the interview feedback. So the SLA we had was it had to be in the ATS within 24 hours. And we switched that up. And so within 24 hours, you had to give a hire, no hire recommendation. And you still needed to do that detailed feedback, right? We have to document that. We have to make sure that we are fair and unbiased and all of that. And then twice a week, the hiring managers, the recruiters, and the sponsors would get in a room, and they'd all kind of talk about each of the candidates and where they thought their their strengths really were in relation to the teams that had open spots. So if we thought that this full stack engineer would be best on the CART team, then the CART team would be like, hey, let's send them our team description as one of their choices. And then a couple other people would do that. And so the person would have at least two choices to pick from. So that's that on the old versus the new. Okay, so how did we do? We boosted average recruiter production. So we went from like 4-ish hires a month to 6.5, which was great. We saved nearly 1,000 interview hours. Like, think it was 964 hours that we saved by having all the engineers trained exactly the same way and being able to choose from a huge number of people to conduct interviews, and without any interviewer feeling like they were doing 8 million in a week and not actually getting to their job stuff. We did meet our goal of 100 engineers in 2 months, which was double our annual hiring goal in the past. We got our last offer acceptance on December 31st. So we just made it in under the wire. And then finally, we reduced the conversion funnel. So before we were, if we conducted 40 recruiter screens, 30 of those people would be sent to the hiring manager for a review. Generally speaking, 22 of those people would pass the hiring manager review and go on to the tech phone screen. And then from there, we'd have 7 interviews and we'd have 1 hire. And I wasn't clear on the number of recruiter screens in the after part, but we were skipping the hiring manager review, which was already huge. And we could have, for every 7 tech phone screens that we had, we'd get 3 interviews out of that and 1 hire. So saved a bunch of time there. All right, so this is all great, but like, where's the technology, Tiff? Great question. Can't wait to answer you. So if I were going to go back and build this today, I would definitely be taking advantage of all of the great technology we have at our fingertips in the recruiting space. And even though I'm listed a few, I'm keeping it super simple. We have so much talent on this call right now, just from some of the people that I recognize, that I know that you all would come up with a million more. But just to give it a little taste, assessments are obviously can be automated. And a lot of companies I've seen mostly use them at that like pre-application phase, where they're like, okay, are you really the right person for this, to apply for this role in the first place? Or after they've applied, they get that right away. And if they do a great job, then they're in the pool. Otherwise, they're automatically rejected. This one has a little bit of a controversy in my heart because assessments are used to usually weed out versus grow in, and so there's definitely an opportunity there. The tech screen. Why can't we automate that? Why can't we use a tool like HireVue and send the candidate the questions, they record themselves answering them, and then somebody can watch that on the backside? And it can be any recruiter, or even we had recruiting coordinators watching the videos when we did it, because they knew what the requirements were and they could tell what was going on. And that was for our call center folks. Or if you were doing an assessment, you might be able to like skip the tech screen. I'll like combine those 2 things, right? So feedback gathering. If everybody's already in Slack all day, we can prompt them there. Slack integrates with so many different other tools that you could definitely pretty easily like set up a Google form for them to put their initial feedback in, and and then they put it in the ATS later or whatever. And then the same thing for interview training refreshers, like, hey, it's time to take your interview training. Click here and you can go take it online. It's time to refresh your interview training. Here's the latest one. And then last one is the team descriptions. Teams change over time, and you want to make sure that you're keeping those up to date. But what if you could just do a simple Slack prompt that went to each team every 6 months, and said, gave them a link to just update it, and then it's ready to go for the next time they have a candidate. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the resources that I have for you. The first one is, and I'm just going to breeze through these because you're going to have these slides, but for the team descriptions, we just ask 4 simple questions. How big is your team? What technologies are you using? What are some big projects you're working on, or, big, hairy, audacious goals you have? And then I really like the one about how do y'all spend your free time, because the way that I would Sometimes I would do the interviews in person. Sometimes you can't get somebody to just write it out for you, but if you have a 10-minute phone call, you can like get it all down. But I would say, how do you spend your free time and how do you stay up to date on current trends in technology and in what you do? And I always got the most interesting answers. Like one person was like, well, I'm in this drone group. And so we meet every month and we go fly our drones and we talk about all the latest in whatever, at the time it was, whatever technologies were on. Maybe they were talking about Java, who knows, but definitely not a place I would expect for people to meet up and talk about software engineering. And I put an example in here for you. Next up, building the interview teams. So I hadn't laid this out earlier. I talked about it, but here it is in writing. And then the maintenance piece, keep up with your team descriptions, meet with your sponsors and make sure that you're hiring to goal and the goal hasn't moved, which anybody who's worked in workforce planning knows that that number moves a lot. And then hiring, throttle up or back based on need, because this is definitely something that you can increase or decrease as you need when your hiring goals change.